Because of its excellent shoreline location, the first summer hotel in Branford, Connecticut was established in 1820, and the number of hotels grew to 19, located from Short Beach to Stony Creek. The heyday of Branford as a summer resort was from the 1880s until World War I, but the last closed in 1960. The Owenego in Indian Neck is the only remaining Branford summer hotel that has room accommodations. Many of the old summer hotels are no longer standing. Stony Creek, with its beautiful views of the Thimble Islands, had 9 summer hotels, and during the summer resort period, some were on the mainland and a few were on the Thimble Islands. People came to Branford at first by horse and wagon or stagecoach. The building of the Shoreline Railway in 1852, connecting Branford west to New Haven and east to New London and beyond, brought many new people to its shores. The train made 10 stops a day during the summer and was a busy place. The hotels sent a carriage to the station for their guests and a separate wagon for the baggage. Some of the hotels were walking distance from the station. The Stony Creek train station was torn down in 1947. Walking distance from the train station was the Brainerd House. John Whittlesey Brainerd and his wife Esther Bailey were from Turkey Hill in Haddam, Connecticut, and they came to Stony Creek in 1866. They converted an existing 1804 house into a summer hotel. They added a 3rd floor, east and west wings, and a veranda. In total, there were 36 rooms. Esther was a very good cook, and it was said that 100 people came to dinner on Sundays at the hotel. The family grew vegetables and had seafood available right outside the door. There were great views from the veranda of the islands, evening strolls along the beach, and singing in the parlor. After John W. and Esther retired, their son Alvin took over the family business and added these tennis courts and a windmill. You'll notice in this photograph the grape arbor on the left-hand side. The Brainerd House was open from May to October, and it cost $2 per day or $18 to $15 per week, depending on the room. Alvin Brainerd died in 1918. Frank E. Brainerd, another son of John and Esther, also helped to run the hotel, and in 1883 built the Brainerd department store seen here on the left-hand side of this photograph. It was the largest department store between New London and New Haven. The hotel was sold to James McLeod in 1922, and he renamed it the Willows for the trees gracing the front entry of the hotel. He modernized the building and added pillars on the front. The Depression soon hit, and the hotel industry took it very hard, and the property was foreclosed in 1933. In 1946, John Elmer Brainerd, son of Frank, repurchased the property so it came back into the Brainerd family. In 1951, the 3rd floor was removed after it was damaged in a storm, and it was made into a 3-family house. John Elmer Brainerd lived here until his death in 1990. After John's death, the building was purchased and restored into a single-family home, and it still has beautiful vistas of the Stony Creek shore and islands. Starting in 1907, you could also take the trolley to Stony Creek to get to some of the hotels or shop across the street at Cinzero's grocery store. The trolley was discontinued in 1935. The trolley station seen here in this photograph is on what is today the Little Stony Creek Green in front of Brainerd's house. A short ways away from the trolley station was the Bayview Inn. It was originally built by Benjamin Green to house quarry workers. He had the first quarry in Stony Creek. The inn had 4 stories with verandas on each of the first 3 floors and a tower. It was also called the Barnes Inn or Stony Creek Inn. At one time, it was the only year-round hotel in Stony Creek. The inn had many different proprietors, but was mostly known as a saloon, which was on the first floor. Seen here on the left is the Brainerd House, and on the right, the Bayview Inn. The hotel was torn down in 1932 for back taxes, and today is the location of Bayview Park, named for the old hotel. As you walked down Main Street in Stony Creek, which is now called Thimble Islands Road, the buildings on the right, directly on the beach, are all gone, some swept out to sea during the 1938 hurricane. In the foreground is the dock for the Brainerd House. Across the street was the Stony Creek House. It was built by Giles Baldwin and first run by James Douglas and later William Foote. It was also known as the Douglas or Foote House. William Foote died in 1873 and is buried in Stony Creek Cemetery. The hotel burned to the ground in 1877 and today is the site of the Stony Creek Church of Christ. Farther down the street, past Seaside Hall, on the left was the Three Elms House. Ebenezer Coe of Middlefield, Connecticut, came to Stony Creek and converted an existing 1835 house into a summer hotel. He ran the hotel for 50 years, from 1854 until 1904. His wife, Phoebe, one guest said, made the best clam fritters in the whole world. The Three Elms was named for the three elm trees on the front porch, and the trees went right through the middle of the porch. When the elm trees died, the locals started calling the hotel the Three Stubs. Ebenezer and Phoebe Coe's daughter, Martha Maynard, continued running the hotel from 1904 till 1916. She also ran a famous Stony Creek hotel called the Indian Point House. You could walk from the Three Elms down a wooden walkway to Maynard's Beach near the current public dock. Not only were the proprietors of the hotels well known to their patrons, but their pets were also. For example, the newspaper reported in 1916 that Dick, the celebrated old horse at the Three Elms, quietly went to a much-needed rest on Monday. After the Coe and Maynard family ran the hotel, the Three Elms had money problems, was raided by the police for illegal gambling and liquor consumption. In the 1950s, it was briefly a restaurant called the Three Elms Restaurant. The Three Elms also had several fires, one in 1944, another in 1978. A one-time tenant at the hotel was Edward Ravoux of the Yale School of Drama, and later a longtime resident of Prospect Hill. The Three Elms Hotel still stands and has long been an apartment building. Not far from the Three Elms is the Linden Point House off of Thimble Islands Road on Linden Point Road. It was built in 1875 and was still open as a hotel in 1928. There are very few pictures of the hotel and very little information. This is a postcard view of the lawn. The building and grounds had considerable damage during the 1938 hurricane. Today, the Linden Point House is a private residence that also acts as a bed and breakfast. Farther down the street was another trolley stop in front of Northrop's store at the corner of Flying Point Road and Prospect Hill. Just up the street was the Flying Point Hotel. It was built in 1868 and was the largest hotel in Stony Creek, accommodating 128 guests. During its tenure, it was also known as the Island View Hotel and the Northrop or Frink House. Steamers from New Haven stopped right in front, and you could walk up a wooden plank to the hotel. The hotel had panoramic views of the Thimble Islands. George Northrop ran the hotel until 1899, and John B. Northrop provided the food. It cost $2.50 a day to stay here. Afterwards, Nathan Frink ran the hotel and renamed it the Island View. The hotel often had financial problems and eventually went bankrupt when the people's vacation tastes changed. From 1924 until 1932, it was the home of a Stony Creek amateur acting group called the Parish Players. From 1933 until 1942, It was the home of the actors and actresses touring or in the permanent cast of the Stony Creek Theater. They stayed here and also practiced here, among them some famous stars. The Island View was demolished in 1942 after the Stony Creek Theater closed. On the Thimble Islands, there were 3 summer hotels. This is the view from the Flying Point Hotel. To get to the islands, you took a boat from the public dock. You could take a private boat. You could also take the boats, the Libby or Tigress, sloops run by Captains Cooper or Page, out to the islands. Another captain was Captain Charles Hill, who had a little steamer called the Margaret, and it was used as a ferry service to the Thimble Islands. In the back is the Branford house in this photograph. Larger steamers of the New Haven line, such as the Richard Peck, also let passengers off at Pot Island. Our first stop on the islands is Money Island, where there were 2 summer hotels. The Money Island house was originally called the Sachem House. It was built about 1865 by Chauncey Dickerman, one of the men that developed Money Island into lots. The hotel was open from June 1st till November 1st and had 34 rooms, 24 of which were guest bedrooms. Steamers from New Haven cost 75 cents for round trip, and the hotel was $2 per day. The proprietor was Leo Spitzer. He renamed it the Shoshone Inn, named for an Indian chief of the Pequot tribe. In actuality, there was no chief Shoshone of the Pequot, but there was a Shoshone tribe, so Spitzer took liberties in naming the hotel. Money Island is the only island on the Thimbles that has street names. One is called Pequot for the Indian tribe, and the other Montawese, named for the Indian chief of the Totoket Indians of New Haven. At the Shoshone Inn, there were clam bakes and picnics. The food was provided by Ebenezer Coe of the 3 Elms Hotel. There was a pavilion for pool tables, dancing. There was croquet and bowling. It's hard to imagine how they could keep a bowling alley on the Thimbles from not warping in the salt air. Money Island is an interesting island. It had 2 hotels, a store, a chapel, along with many cottages. All the hotels advertised in the newspaper or via brochures. In this brochure for the Shoshone Inn, it claimed, from its elevated position and constant breezes, it was perfect freedom from dampness and malaria and has no mosquitoes. It is a sure cure for hay fever, and it is one of the healthiest places in the world. In another ad, the Shoshone Inn is here for those seeking piety, temperance, and domestic order. But in 1896, so much for temperance, the hotel was raided several times for illegal sale of alcohol. In 1920, the Money Island house was cut in half, the left half was discarded, and the right half made into a cottage. Today, it is a private cottage enjoyed by the same family since 1946. The other hotel on Money Island was the Harborview Hotel on Pequot Avenue and was built in the 1870s. It was also run by Leo Spitzer from 1892 till 1916, and the cottage was later owned by Ella Bunton, who owned several cottages on Money Island. 50 people could stay at the Harborview. Leo Spitzer was a newspaper reporter, handled all the island's mail, was a chef, sold food to boaters, had a telephone, the only one on the islands, 2 hotels, a store, and a ferry service. This is a photograph of his store on Money Island called the Rudder Station. Wayne Jacobson, in his book about Stony Creek called Map and Scrap, said that Spitzer was uncouth and long-haired, very shrewd. Leo Spitzer died in 1916, and the hotel probably closed during the Depression. His wife, Yvonne, lived on the mainland until her death in 1954. Today, the Harborview Hotel is a private cottage. Our last hotel on the Thimbles was on Pot Island, known as the Pot Island House, also the Thimble Island House or Treasure Island House. It was built in 1846 by Branford resident William Bryan. It had 3 stories and 20 rooms, and the island was 12 acres. Bryan's son, William Alden Bryan, built Branford's most famous summer hotel, the Montaguese House in Indian Neck, in 1866. When the hotel first opened, William Bryan placed this ad in the New Haven paper, and he said the Captain Kidd signed a rock on the island, and the island is named Pot or Treasure in honor of Captain Kidd. The rock, of course, has never been found, but the legend of Captain Kidd flourishes today. Pot Island had one of the best docks in the Thimbles for sailboats and the large steamers coming out of New Haven. People came for the day to fish, have a clam bake, or a picnic. On the Pot Island, there was a dance pavilion, tennis courts, bowling, and a pool room. In 1864, the hotel was sold to William, known as Billy Barnes, of New Haven. He was a Civil War veteran, and the family ran the hotel until 1911. People said that Billy Barnes was a jolly good fellow. He built a bridge connecting the two parts of Pot Island. He also built a 40-foot tower on the island in 1884, seen here in this photograph. His son, Willie, took people up to the top of the tower for 5 cents. Photographs of the Thimbles during this period that look like aerial photos were really taken from the top of this tower. The Pot Island House was sold to the Madison Avenue Church of New York City in 1912. They used it as a retreat until 1936. A New York City painter and teacher, George Barber, occupied the old hotel until 1962. In that year, the hotel and island were for sale with all its original furnishings. It was 3 stories, had 30 rooms, 19 bedrooms, a game room, and included 5 acres of the 12-acre island. In 1994, it was for sale again and purchased for $60,000 by 6 families, including Dwight Carter, captain of one of Stony Creek's ferries. In more recent years, it has been for sale for over $5 million. The old hotel by then was 6,300 square feet, 11 bedrooms, 5.5 baths on 2.5 acres. It remains the oldest building still standing on the Thimble Islands. Back on the mainland, and the most famous of Stony Creek's summer hotels was the Indian Point House. It was built in 1854 by Ebenezer Coe of the Three Elms House and was owned by the Coe family for 3 generations. The complex was on 5 acres with a hotel, tennis courts, 35 bathhouses, 4 cottages, and other outbuildings. The front of the hotel overlooked to what is today the public dock. Nathan Frink managed the hotel for the Coe family for 35 years. You might remember that Frink also ran the Flying Point Hotel. Afterwards, Martha Maynard, daughter of Ebenezer Coe, ran the Indian Point House. It cost $5 a day to stay here and $1.50 for dinner. Martha's daughter Alice and her husband Charles Madeira then ran the hotel until 1940. You were met at the train station by a carriage. Families came back to the Indian Point House year after year. The late Lucy Hall, who lived in Stony Creek, said that the children often played in this gazebo up in the trees, and one time there was a beehive and the bees stung her all the way home. The Indian Point House was famous for its wonderful view, hospitality, oysters, and clam bakes. The family grew all their own vegetables and fruits, had poultry, and all the seafood was caught locally. Along Thimble Islands Road was a tennis court. The grounds sustained heavy damage during the 1938 hurricane, but the hotel building fared fairly well and opened the next season. The hotel was sold by the Madeira family in 1942 to Donald Smith, who ran it until 1964 when it was sold. The hotel ran continuously for 90 years. Right after the sale in 1964, the main building was very badly damaged by fire and had to be torn down. The entire complex was subdivided into 2 pieces. On one piece, in 1965, the Indian Point Beach Club was built, a private beach club. Later, this building was the America Cup restaurant. Daniel Terman of New York bought the property in 1981, and it became known as the Compound. The site of the former Indian Point House in 1996, a private home was built overlooking the Thimble Islands. From 1846 until 1964, people from the cities of Connecticut and beyond came to Stony Creek via train, boat, or trolley to one of the village's 9 summer hotels. They came to escape the summer heat, enjoy the view, cool breezes, food, and hospitality of the summer hotels of Stony Creek.